How to create a game in 48 hours for a game jam in a successful way. So I'm Bernard. I'm the founder of Preview Labs. We're doing rapid prototyping. So it's not the first time I'll be participating in a game jam. I can really recommend it. It's really fun. So I hope there are a lot of people here who are participating this weekend. It's not always easy to succeed. Like usually the majority of people trying to make a game for jam fail in a certain way, like that maybe they don't achieve what they wanted to do, and that's why I'm giving this talk. I'm trying to assemble all my previous experience with game jams in order to help. So basically my talk is about maximizing your chances to end up with a playable game. So why would you want to do this? It's a very useful piece in your portfolio if you're looking for a job. For example, it's something if I select programmers to work at Preview Labs, for me it's a big added value. Of course it's very satisfying if you can end up with a game that you can actually play, you can show it to friends. And yeah, sometimes you can even win a prize. Like once I participated in a game jam and I won an apple. And I had to share it. So it's not for the prizes or anything, it's just for satisfaction, it's for fun. It's quite simple to succeed. It's as simple as 1, 2, 3, 4. First you have the preparation. What could you do in order to prepare for a game jam? What can you do before it starts? The concept, so coming up with a concept for your game, that's also quite a crucial part. And then coming up with a plan, like, okay, how am I going to approach it? So it's like right after you know, okay, this is what we're going to make. How do you plan a little? And of course, then you need to execute, you need to do the plan, execute your plan, or you need to implement the game, obviously. So first, about the preparation. I'm just going to cover a couple of points. It's not like everything is a must, and I know you can do a game jam without preparing. The first thing is that can help. It's just a simple thing to do on your computer. Is like to create a clean user account. Especially in my case, I have a lot of open documents, and my desktop looks like a trash bin. It's really better like for me to start with a clean account. Nothing, no distraction, no email account setup. I can share my password to other people in the team if I'm asleep and they need to do something on my computer for the sake of the project. Another thing you can do is make sure you have your tools that you may want to use already installed, so you don't need to start sending a 4 GB Unity version, or I don't know, maybe 2 GB, over the network, which may be already very slow at the game jam. It could be Unity if you're a programmer or anyone else on the project. Photoshop, audio tools like Audacity, Tortoise for version control. One of the practices that are interesting in a game jam and used by very few people is actually using a version control system. It's something mainly made for programmers, but it's important for everybody to understand it a little bit. And I would recommend using it if you have at least one person who's experienced with it on your team. You can prepare by installing a client for it on your computer, like Tortoise if you're using Windows. Basically, you'll get a folder with the project, and you can say, I want to update, which means I get the latest version of the project. Or you can commit, that means I can add my changes to the project, so everybody can see it. You don't end up screwing up your project and then the next hour trying to fix it so you're back to a working project. No, you just say, okay, I just go back to the previous version and you're good. One thing that's better than having to transfer files over USB drive to your teammates could be setting up like a shared folder. In Windows you can share a folder if you connect to the same network. So that's something you could also do if there is nobody with SVN experience on your team. Like if you're running on a Mac, there's with a few commands you can actually host an SVN for the rest of your teammates. It's very simple. You just need to make sure that if you go to bed, you don't close your laptop and people don't know your password because they won't be able to access it anymore. So, what I do sometimes at the game jam is I bring my own router, and preferably a router where everybody connects with a cable, because it goes a lot faster if you need to transfer files to each other. Because in some cases, if there are a lot of jammers and only one Wi-Fi, the wireless speeds go very slow. Other things, earplugs. That's basically if you're sleeping and there's too much noise, it can really help. What I experienced is once I drank too many energy drinks, I discovered there's a limit to how many you can drink in a night. I think it is about 4. So I tried to sleep and I couldn't. I just had to go for 2 hours or something, and then I continued on the game. And about food, there are some people who say that like if you eat a lot of fries or fatty foods or pizzas, it's not very good because it makes you more sleepy. How do you come up with a concept? First, you need to define the constraints. The constraints are like those things. They will guide you in your choices. Okay, what ideas can you come up with? It needs, of course, the ideas you come up with need to be, or you need to try to be, like, for example, within the team. Once everybody knows, okay, this is the team and we understand it, and this is how we think what the team means, then it's about generating as many ideas as you can. And no idea is too crazy. So you don't need to worry if you have an idea that may not work. Just say it. Just say it. And so basically we don't judge, we write down all the ideas, so later we will go through them. And it's also important to try to include everybody in this process, everybody who's sitting with you at a table. Once you have all those ideas on paper, then you're like ranking them. For example, one way of doing it is having everybody on the table create like a top 10 or something. And then maybe the best game you give it 10 points and the second 9, 8, 7. Or maybe there's just a consensus, okay, we all like this idea most. You just need to find a way to get to the idea that you all like, or multiple possible good ideas. And then you need to flesh them out. That means you need to think about the idea and try to form this mental image of the idea, like, so you can see yourself playing it and see if you know, okay, what will happen if I do this and do that. So you get like kind of more or less a complete picture of the game. Basically, you come up with the gameplay mechanics. One thing I'm very confident about, or very sure about, that will lead to a higher chance of success is if you have an idea or a concept that can be stripped. You can take out features, and if you have a very small core that you can implement in a short amount of time, and that is already fun, then you can focus on adding the features that you envisioned initially, adding them back on the game while you're doing the game jam. But whenever you run out of time, you can stop and you end up with a playable game. If your game doesn't require a lot of balancing, it can also be interesting. I'm not saying don't do an RPG. No, if you really want to do it, you can do it, but you need to be aware of it and you need to start balancing very early, and not if you only have 4 or 8 hours left, because it takes a long time. Other things, if you do a complicated multiplayer concept, it might be kind of hard. There are other things like physics-based games can be hard. It also requires a lot of tuning and balancing to get it to work, but it's possible. This is about what's the ideal team size for a game jam. I think, okay, 2 to 3 programmers is ideal, because one programmer, okay, it's a bit alone, and I found it very useful if I sleep, that someone else who slept during another part of the day is continuing, and it's like really nice. And if you're with 3, you can do that even more. But then you get a bit more communication between the programmers. So I think 2 to 3 is fine, and 4 and more is probably too much. You probably need an artist, 1 or 2, I think. If you're too much, there isn't, well, it's not like you can create that amount of art that can all end up in the game. So unless you're doing like a story or something, and it creates a lot. It requires a lot of art and not a lot of programming. But otherwise, the amount of art is limited by how much the programmers can do in 48 hours. And then a game designer, you can have a game designer. Like if you have a game with a story, it can be interesting. But it's not. It's optional, I would say.
Do you define a team leader or project leader?
I wouldn't say there is a single person whose sole responsibility is to be the team leader. You'll feel it like in the first discussions, like once you have your team together, you talk about the concept. Sometimes there's like a person who emerges as like a natural leader. In other cases, we had two natural leaders, and it was kind of a conflict with me and the other guy. So now we get to the planning phase. It's basically once you know exactly the concept and you have a team, how do you start? What should be the goals in your first meeting? First, it's important that after this meeting, everybody will know what to do. Another thing is that you don't forget any key elements. That's important. That's a good purpose for this first meeting. You don't want to forget that you need to do level design. So you need to plan a little bit and say, okay, after how many hours would we start on level design? Maybe you need to talk about everybody's expectations regarding sleep. What are the goals of those first tasks that we want to define in this first meeting? It's important to get to something playable as soon as possible. I also suggest, okay, one of the first tasks could be to create dummy graphics. It depends a bit on the concept of your game and the programming of it, like how soon you can start integrating graphics. If it's very soon, you want dummy graphics. Basically, your artist will create some mock-up graphics, very simple, could be sketches, could be just files with colors in it, or whatever. It depends on the concept of your game, of course. But it can be very interesting to create some dummy graphics, so the programmers can already try to use them and maybe learn some lessons about how the graphics should be delivered or what kind of graphics are actually required before having the artist start on creating very rich and detailed graphics. In this first meeting, you need to define, okay, how are we going to reach this first playable thing with dummy graphics, and then probably work on the list, okay, we can add this feature, that feature, that feature. In the beginning, it's important, everybody needs to know what to do, and then later you can still come together as a team, talk about it, talk about your progress, see if any changes are required. The goal is just to evaluate, okay, how are we doing? Because we said, okay, we had these and these tasks, this is how long they take, where are we now, how much time was already spent? Maybe you need to take a look how much time is left, and maybe redistribute the tasks a bit and say, okay, we're not going to do this and this feature. If you encounter a problem, it's okay to try another solution. I know it can be interesting, especially for programmers, if you see, yeah, this is a hard problem, I really want to solve it, I want to find a solution, but you're going to waste a lot of time, so think about it. Think about it, isn't there a much easier way to do it? Just by changing the scope, by changing the game a little bit, making it easier. And that actually concludes my presentation. I don't mean to add any pressure, like if you create a game jam game and you feel it's not a problem, you'll try again next time and learn from that. So, okay, and then I'll conclude with my last slide. Does anybody have any questions?
Is this your blog?
No, it's not. I just found it on the internet. I googled funny dog, so if you're bored, just Google funny dog, image search, and you'll find some.